I'm here with Dr. Mary Stockwell, the chairperson of the History, Political Science, and Geography Department here at Lourdes. Thank you for allowing me to interview you today.
You're very much welcome.
I'd like to start out asking you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your educational history.
Oh, okay. I'm a historian, a trained historian. I have a bachelor's in history, and I'm going to let my phone just go, and a master's in history and also one in philosophy. And my specialty is American history, and my PhD is in American history. So I'm interested in all kinds of things. Of course, American politics, especially the early national period, and American intellectual history. And I like to write, and I've just written a new book on Woodrow Wilson. It's going to be published very soon, a biography. And I've written state histories for Ohio, Massachusetts, and other places. So that's me. And I taught here for a while, and I've taught at other places. But got any questions about my background that you might think I should tell the students?
I just thought it'd be interesting to let them know what your expertise was.
Okay.
Before asking some questions about the Electoral College, which
All
is
right.
the focus of the presentation.
Okay.
Can you tell us about the Electoral College from a historical perspective?
Well, the Electoral College is part of the Constitution, and it's part of Article 2 of the Constitution, which deals with the executive branch and the presidency. And when we were getting started as a nation back in 1787 is when we write our Constitution, we had a big problem, and that is, how do we set up an executive and a democracy? It had never been done before. We had the legislature, we had experience with that in our colonial assemblies, but outside of a king and a colonial governors, we didn't know what this person, the president, should be. And it was very, if you want to take a look at this, you can take a look at the Constitution. Article 1 on the Congress is very long. They explain what the Congress is supposed to do. When they get to this new thing called the president, elected in a democracy, the job description is much shorter. So they have to make it up as they go along. They know what kings are, they know what emperors are, but what is an elected person in a democracy? They don't quite know. They give him specific jobs, they give him certain things that he's supposed to do, and then they become very worried about how exactly do the people elect him. Now you gotta put yourself in their mindset, and that is, we have never done this before. Every time people have tried to do a democracy in the past, it's gone wrong, because as soon as there's a problem, the people panic, and they turn their elected or their chosen leader into a dictator. They give them all the power. It's called the man on the white horse syndrome, and they're petrified of it. So what they wanted to do was set up a way that the people didn't directly elect the president. The electors, who represented the people, elected the president. They wanted one step in between us and them, and that's where the Electoral College comes from. The states, either the state representatives or however the state wants to do it, chooses electors. And those electors have to be the amount of the senators and the amount of representatives from that state. So population is important. It protects the integrity of the states also, because we're not just voting as individuals, we're voting as states. So that was the plan. How do you keep the states integral to the process, and then how do you prevent the election and possible takeover of a dictator? That's the purpose of the Electoral College in the beginning.
Do you think that it's still, those reasons are still relevant today?
I would think most historians, and I'm included in this, don't think the very first reason they put the Electoral College in is valid anymore. And that's, you need to keep up some kind of barrier between the people and that top executive. The founders weren't worried about a barrier between the people and the people going into the Congress. They allowed people to go into the House of Representatives directly. But this idea that we should have a barrier between the voters and the president so we don't get a dictator now seems outdated. And it seems outdated because we've been successful in not doing that. I think when President Andrew Jackson takes power in the 1820s, even though people dislike him very much today because of his treatment of the Indians, he had great faith in general in the people. And his idea was, look at me. I seem to be not what the founders would have wanted, and yet I didn't become a dictator despite all my flaws. And since then we kind of go with Jackson, that the people have a right to choose the top leader. Where I say it's still valuable, though, is that second, more hidden reason of why we have the Electoral College, and that is you want to preserve the integrity of the states. We don't just want a whole mass of people, we want to be American citizens and citizens of Ohio and Pennsylvania and Mississippi and Texas. By having the Electoral College, candidates have to come and talk to us, not just as Americans, but as members of our individual states. And for that reason, I have come to the conclusion that the Electoral College still serves a valuable purpose in the way we set up the Constitution and our Federation.
If you could change something about our system of elections, what would that be?
I write a constitutional amendment, and a constitutional amendment which would say whoever wins the popular vote, whichever candidate wins the popular vote in the state, automatically gets all the electoral votes. And then it's just a mathematical calculation. That would make the candidates have to talk to all of us, because it's a constant battle to see what electoral makeup will get them into the presidency. The popular vote is still 90 to 95% of the reason. But if you have to go out and you have to talk to some northern states, some southern states, some western states to win, that again keeps the system, our federation of the nation and the states, more solid. If we got rid of the Electoral College, what I fear, and some historians fear, and political scientists fear, that a candidate could just literally go talk to the most populous states. The candidate could go talk to New York, go talk to Texas and California, stay in big cities, and the rest of us never are spoken to. So at first it seems so unfair, but if you take a time to look at how big our country is and how the states have to be brought into the electoral process for the president, because he or she represents us all, the Electoral College still makes sense. But I finish it once and for all. There'd be no debating this. You win the popular vote in the state, you win the electoral votes.
In your opinion, is the Electoral College ethical?
I think it is ethical. Even in that first way I described it, where our founding generation is struggling with how do you not get a Napoleon? He's going to come down the road. How do you not get a Simon Bolivar who steps in and runs a revolution and takes over? Now that's the future. They're looking back into the past and they're thinking of ancient Rome. And they're thinking anytime the Romans had a solid republic, there would be a crisis and they would hand over the government to someone powerful, like a Caesar who never gave it back. They look back at ancient Greece, and they felt the same thing. Whenever there was a war or danger, there would be a tendency of the people to give up their freedom for safety. And that petrified our founding generation. So when they put in the Electoral College, I believe they were making a serious ethical decision, meaning give the American people time to develop this new thing called democracy and freedom, and make sure they don't have the option of turning to a leader and giving him absolute power. We're going to have this kind of wall of the electors in place. It was similar to the way the Senate was originally going to be elected, not by the people, but by the state assemblies. Well, we got rid of that in the 16th Amendment. Now we have direct election of senators. I believe at the time they were being extremely wise in giving us time. If you want to understand, again, what they were trying to accomplish, I wouldn't say immediately start, is it an ethical thing? Go back in history. In 1789, we get started under the Constitution with our electoral system of choosing the president. Take a look what's happening simultaneously in France. 1789, they go into their revolution. They try to have a democracy, and they fail. And they end up with Napoleon. And in 1803, he declares himself dictator. That's what the American founding generation was trying so hard to prevent. Again, we need to look more to Latin America. The Latin American Revolution started about 1810 to about 1825. Same thing happens. They have a revolution. They talk about having democracy, but almost immediately the people at the top grab power and are dictators. That's what our system was meant to prevent. And I think they did a good job. That has never happened. Washington didn't seize power. Jackson didn't seize power. Even in wartime, tremendously powerful presidents like Lincoln and FDR don't seize power. For that reason, I believe it was ethical. why it continues to be ethical today is we're not just a mass of Americans. We are Americans, but we are from Ohio, and we're from Kentucky, and we're from North Dakota. And that founding generation said, those states are valuable. They should continue to exist. Now, how do we calculate that into the big national election where we're all picking this one very important person? One way to do it is to keep the Electoral College, because then it really keeps the candidates honest. They have to come now talk to all of us to try to win some kind of matchup to become president of the United States. So I feel both in 1789 and today it's still very ethical.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. This will conclude the interview.
Okay.
I think it's been a really valuable session. Thank you again.
Anytime, it's been a pleasure to answer these questions. And go vote, everybody.
Thank you.